So I love this quote by Lupita Nyong'o that says, "Your dreams are valid, but many of the times we never chase our dreams because of our status. We think we don't have the unfair advantage to achieve the goals that we've set." So in this episode, we're going to talk about how to cultivate and foster your unfair advantage. Welcome back to the Frame Solutions podcast. If it's your first time, welcome. And if you're a returning subscriber, hi, good to have you back. I'm delighted that you're tuning in today. The last episode I did, I promised that I would be sharing with you how to create your unfair advantage in life and in your career. I was able to record an episode, but when I looked at the footage, it was blur, so I could not share it. So this is my second time recording this episode, and I'm sure it will be better than the previous one. So let's get right into this episode. So when it comes to creating yourself an unfair advantage, I believe all of us have an unfair advantage. Unfair advantage are the things that set you apart from the rest of the people. This world has around 8 billion people, and everyone is unique in their own way. I am different from anyone I've ever met, and you are different from any other person you know, be it your family member or your children. You are different genetically and also on an individual level. So when you harness that fact that you are different from the rest of the people, that automatically sets you apart from the rest of the people. I could go in and debate more about this, but I think it hits home for me to tell you that we are different people. We all have our unique strength, we all have our unique weaknesses, we all have our unique skills, unique mindsets, and it's that difference that makes the world an interesting place to live. Imagine if all of us were the same. This world would not be a good world to live in the sense that we will all think the same, we'll all do the same things. So there wouldn't be anything that we can learn from each other. There wouldn't be innovation. We'd all be living just a blur, boring life. So when you know that point that you are different, you can work on capitalizing your differences. And that's what I'm going to discuss in this episode. Of course, as always, I always love to throw myself under the bus. I share with you so many stories on my podcast because it's more of a relational kind of podcast. And I love just sharing because from my lessons, you can pick a lesson. So I'm a last born of 5. By the time I was born, my parents had retired. I come from Uganda, East Africa, and growing up, the fact that my parents were retired, they only had their pension to look after me. So I studied my primary school, I went to secondary school. Of course, they were paying my tuition. They took me to good schools based on the sacrifices they made in their lives. And at that point, I knew I wanted to do medicine at the university. But as unluck would fall on my side, I ended up not getting the points to get into medicine on government sponsorship. If you come from Uganda or East Africa, you know that the government usually sponsors top tier students to do the courses they've chosen at university. I was unlucky, I didn't get to do medicine at university, and I ended up being a privately sponsored university student. Saget University, I did biomedical sciences, and when I got into that class, I was sure that this would be the last thing that my parents would be paying for. It was not cheap given that my parents had retired, and their retirement meant that they were professionals. My dad was an accountant, my mom was a teacher, so they didn't have a lot to their names. It was through those sacrifices they made to take me through school. When I got to university for my undergraduate, I knew I had to do everything possible in my means to excel and become a top student. That happened. I got the grades, I finished university. But when I finished university, I had done a practical course. I had done a few industrial placements, which are usually internships where they send you to a different university, a different biotech company, a different organization to learn the skills you need to complete your undergraduate degree. So I had that exposure in that sense. And I think I did around 8 internships during my undergraduate. I loved the course because it was a very intense course, but again, it was very, very hard to do. You had to sacrifice a lot to go through that course. So I finished my course. I have my papers in my hand. I have a second class upper degree, and I'm thinking, what do I do with this degree? I started looking for jobs. But No one employs anyone without working experience, especially when you're going to work on humans, because as a biomedical scientist, most times you're going to work either on the humans or you're going to work on samples which are related to humans or human organs. So I could not get a job. I was very devastated in that aspect, but I didn't let the devastation stop me from pursuing my career. What I did is I started looking for places where I would go in for an internship. So I found the Uganda Cancer Institute. I went and did some internship there for like 3 months. And in the process, I also found another John Hopkins part in Uganda. It's called Makerere University, John Hopkins University Research Collaboration. I get into there and I'm able to learn some of the skills that I knew would benefit me in getting to the job market. So the first lesson I learned in my career earlier on was you have to make sure you are proactive. I would have just sat home and said, okay, I'm going to apply for any job that's coming my way. I'll just keep sending in my application. They say insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. I'd applied for a couple of jobs in the different research groups in Uganda, but they were negative. I wasn't getting called for the interviews. So the other thing I had to do was to look at what other thing could I do. And the most important thing I could do at that start was to get myself a volunteering experience. When I went into volunteering, I wasn't just a typical volunteer. I was that volunteer who would ask questions. I was that volunteer who went beyond her means to do things that I knew would benefit my career. For instance, I would go and ask for different opportunities to learn other skills that I needed to have hands-on experience. I would go further to make networks with the people I knew would benefit my career. I got myself mentors. I got myself better references. I got myself people who would vie for me for new opportunities that came my way. And while doing those internships, a job opportunity shows up at an institute I wanted to work at. And guess what? I applied for the job and I was called for the interview. And when I went into the interview, I had all the skills they needed for the person to work in that position. So I was given a job, the first biggest salary I'd ever dreamt of, because it was a US funded project. The monies were good. I felt I had made it. I felt my career was on a trajectory that was going to lead me into becoming that researcher I always dreamed to be. So I get into this institute. I loved working there. The pay was good. The people were good. But some of the people I worked with were complacent, in the sense that many of them had been there from the time I was born. I was born in the late 1980s. And one day I told him I wanted to do a master's degree. He tells me, Faith, you're very ambitious. So I'm like, okay. Aren't I supposed to have ambition? So when he told me that, I noticed he started distancing himself from me. So I'm thinking, at the back of his mind, he was thinking, oh yeah, this girl wants to do a master's, so she wants to come and take my place. Those things happen. So again, I also faced some other hurdles. For instance, my immediate boss could not send my references when I told him I wanted to apply for a master's degree to study in the UK. I had a few scholarships I'd applied for to go to the UK, but he never sent any of my references. And these universities would write to me and tell me, we received your application, but this reference was missing. As a result, your application cannot be considered. So when I faced that hurdle, I decided to find myself someone else who knew my capabilities, who I had worked closely with, who would recommend me into the scholarships I wanted to get. And I got myself a mentor. So number 2 is you have to get yourself a mentor. If you want to advance in your career, there's so many people who have achieved the things that you want to get in your career. So the most important thing would be to learn from them. You can do it on your own, but most time if you're doing something on your own, it's going to take you twice or even 10 times harder than a person who has a mentor. So I got myself a mentor. He mentored me on many aspects of my career. He showed me what direction I could take if I wanted to be a scientist, if I wanted to get into biotech. He also enlightened me on so many things that I'd taken slightly while advancing my career. So I get my mentor like in March. An opportunity shows up in May. I apply for it. I'm shortlisted for the scholarship opportunity to go and study at the University of Manchester. And I go for the interview. I had everything they needed. I had the reference, I had the credentials, I had the working experience, because most times those scholarships want you to have at least 2 years working experience before you can apply for scholarship to study abroad. And I had someone who could vie for me in that aspect. So I get the scholarship, I moved to the UK. Number 3 is, when I went to the UK, I knew that UK was going to be a springboard into that scientist I would end up being. Initially, I wanted to do HIV research because where I come from, HIV is really endemic. Many people suffer from HIV, and the research that I was working on initially was HIV related. When I was working at that institute I mentioned, I was doing HIV surveillance in different aspects of Uganda. We were looking at patients who had been recruited, who had been put on the ARTs, the HIV drugs. So I did that project, and in the end I ended up having some papers published from that research. So I get to the UK, the University of Manchester. I loved studying at the University of Manchester. I loved my experience there. It enlightened me on a more intellectual level. I get to meet different researchers. I get to try out different things. I get to step out and get out of my bubble. So I get to the UK. I loved my experience there. But while I was doing my master's at Manchester, I knew that this master's was going to be a springboard for me to get a PhD in the end. I wanted to work on vaccine research because that's always been my goal, to make sure that I generate either vaccines which prevent diseases or treatments which are therapeutics to treat the different diseases, or diagnostics which test the presence or the absence of diseases or disease-causing agents in a human. So those have always been my core values when it comes to my scientific research. So I get there, I loved it. Of course, I worked on an HIV vaccine project. The reason why I'm sharing with you this story is to tell you that at any aspect of your career, you can always learn a thing or two. You can always use what you have to get you where you want to go. So I'm doing my master's. I've gotten this project about HIV vaccine, and I see an opportunity to go and present a poster at a vaccines conference in Washington, Seattle. And I'm thinking, okay, I've just started this project. I don't know much about it, but what are the odds for me finding this scholarship in this regard? So I see the scholarship, I apply for it. But when I applied for the scholarship, I had a 50-50 chance of getting it because I was just doing a master's project for 3 months. I had some data already that I could collect and create a poster out of it. And lo and behold, I get that scholarship to go and present my work at Keystone Symposium in Washington, Seattle. So I get the scholarship, I go to the US and present my work, then I return to the UK. When I returned to the UK, I found an opportunity for me to apply for a PhD to come to Australia. Even when I was applying for the PhD to come to Australia, I had not completed my master's. And I also wrote to the professor and expressed my interest in joining the research group where the PhD was supposed to be. I tell them, I've not completed my master's scholarship, but this is what I've been working on, and these are my goals, and this is where I see myself 5 years from now as a scientist. Of course, I also got that scholarship. I wouldn't say it was accidental for me to get the scholarships, but getting those 3 scholarships, a scholarship to do my master's in the UK, a scholarship to attend the Keystone Symposium, which is one of the biggest scientific conferences held in the world, and also a scholarship to do my PhD in Australia, were proof of what is possible when you decide to believe in yourself. Against all odds, the most important thing you need to do is to believe something is possible for you. So my number 3 thing is belief. Every time you believe something, you create the evidence of that thing. If you believe you're going to succeed, the evidence of success will start showing in your life. I'm a Christian, and the Bible tells me that as a man thinks, so is he. If you believe and visualize that what you want, you've achieved, you'll automatically achieve that thing. Even when you have the doubts at the back of your head telling you it's not possible, the belief supersedes those doubts. The belief creates the evidence to show you that this is actually possible. Many of the things that have been invented, I love to read a lot about technology. You'll see that these people, the most important thing they do is that they believe in a vision. Martin Luther said, "I have a dream." He believed he had a dream. When you read about the Elon Musks and you read about the richest guys in the world, many of them believe in a given thing. And when they believe, they create the evidence to show that it's possible to achieve what they believed. Of course, you can not only believe, but you also have to believe and take action. So number 4 is for you to take action. In any aspect of your life, you can take action. Even if you have an obstacle in the way, that obstacle can become the way by taking action. Taking action in the sense that you analyze your situation in its entirety. As I've mentioned, I went to work at this institute. I told this guy I wanted to do a master's. The guy tells me I'm very ambitious. My immediate boss didn't send my scholarship application references. He does not refer me to those opportunities. But if I just sat and curled my hands and thought, okay, this guy is not supporting me, I'll stay where I am. I took the action of finding myself someone who was in close proximity with me and had worked with this person, and this person had seen the work that I was doing and he could vouch for me on my capabilities. That person ended up changing my career, and up to now I hold him with high regard because he led me to the scientist I am. Hadn't it been for his recommendations, hadn't it been for his guidance, I wouldn't be the scientist I am. So taking action can help you create your unfair advantage. Number 5 is playing to your strength. As I mentioned at the start of this episode, we all have things that we are good at. We all have those things that inherently come very easy for us. For instance, if you woke me up today and told me to talk about these things that I talk about, I will open my mouth and say something because I know the things I'm good at. If you woke me up and told me to talk about vaccines, therapeutics, I would be able to say something because I have immersed myself in studying the ins and outs of how the vaccines and my scientific career works. If you give me an opportunity to motivate another person, to coach another person in their career, I'll be able to do that because that's something I live and breathe every single day. So strength are those things that make you strong. Anything in your life that you find you're good at, capitalize on that strength. Because what you think is so easy for you to do, someone else is struggling in that thing, you know. It might be a skill that you're good at. If someone got you up today and told you, give a speech, you can say the most compelling speech to move someone, to motivate someone. But if you just sit on it and don't do anything. I recently read this book. It's called Show Your Work by Austin Kleon. This book, he tells you about the benefits of having an amateur mindset. An amateur is excited about their craft. They like the things they're doing. And in that aspect, they're able to talk about the things without feeling that someone else is going to judge them. It also shares with you some basic principles you can learn when it comes to showing your work. In this digital age, if you want to create your unfair advantage, you have to make sure that you put yourself out there. Putting yourself out there is going to come down to showing the work that you do. Show your work. Start a YouTube channel like me. Start a podcast. Start a blog. Share on LinkedIn. Have a TikTok account. Have an Instagram account. Start a newsletter. All those are aspects that can help you cement what you're good at. Creating your unfair advantage is very easy in this digital age because of the publicity. Gone are the days where someone had to send a letter and wait 4 weeks to receive feedback. Now you can send an email and the instant you send it, the person has received it. So if we capitalize on the things that are in our favors and also capitalized on our strength, our lives would be better. Coming from what they call the third world countries, I come from Uganda, gave me the unfair advantage in the sense that I could speak about the problems we have in my country and someone else would believe me who had never been there or who has been there and don't know the ins and outs of the country. For instance, I recall when I was writing my motivation for scholarship, I told the selection committee that as a person who comes from Uganda, I've been able to see so many people suffer from these infectious diseases. In fact, I worked on an HIV project And on that project, I saw the scourge HIV had caused. I saw the effects of this disease, and I could articulate them very well in my cover letter and convince the selection committee that I had what it takes to go and learn those skills, which skills I would use to help solve the problem that I'd seen. It might be your location. Where are you right now? Are you in a country that is facing something that you can talk about? Are you having cheap labor where you are that you can utilize to start a business? Are you in a place where there's constant internet that you can use it to your benefit? Look at the things that you already have right now in your vicinity and in your current location, and use those things to the benefit of yourself. Many people are lucky to have the status, in the sense that they are rich, they come from well-known families, but my status was a middle-income earning status. And I used that status to my advantage, in the sense that when I was talking about my upbringing, I could infuse it in my career story. And in that instance, someone who read my story would believe the things I'm telling them because I had lived that life. Your status does not need to be a bad status. You might be in a good status right now. You're qualified in the sense that you've studied, you know your things, you know what you talk about. You can start talking about the things and create that unfair advantage to lead you where you want to go. Some people are so talented to come up with new things. That's when your intelligence comes in, your skills, your intellect. You can use your skills to create that unfair advantage you need to move you in the direction that you want to. I'll tell you this, I've not had a job for the last 6 months. I lost my contract at the end of 2023. And during this point, I would have just sat back, probably lamented about it. But I've decided to create this YouTube channel and consistently share with you my lessons, share with you my quirks, share with you my vulnerable stories, with an intent of creating a community of like-minded people to whom I can sell my services when I decide to whom I can build a community where we can share ideas, where I can coach some of the people who are advancing their career. And in that instance, I'm creating myself that unfair advantage. So, whatever obstacle is thrown in your way, you can use it to create for yourself an unfair advantage. I could go on with this podcast episode for the next 1 hour, but I want you to take this out of this episode. We all have something that we are good at. We all have something that makes us tick. If we capitalize on those things, you would already have that unfair advantage to set you apart from the rest of the people. So, if you've loved this episode, please consider subscribing to my YouTube channel. It's lovely to have these long episodes, and if you enjoy them, please subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next episode. As always, let's get talking in the comments. And if you listen to this podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please leave a review and a rating and share it with someone that it would benefit. Otherwise, I'll catch you in the next episode, and bye-bye.